Welcome to Dusky Drama Stories. Today's story begins in New York. My name is Lila. I'm 24. Last week, my parents kicked me out of the house, but still expected me to pay their bills. No warning, no conversation, no compromise. Just a verdict dropped after dinner, like it was a sentence I couldn't appeal. It all started because I finally said no. I refused to wire more money for my sister's tuition when my own savings account was barely keeping me afloat. That tiny word, no, was enough to flip my world upside down. The argument escalated fast. Voices rose, chairs scraped against the floor, and suddenly I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was just a walking ATM that had dared to malfunction. "If you don't want to help, then you don't need to live here," my father snapped, pointing toward my room as if it were already vacant. My mother didn't even blink. She crossed her arms and said, "You'll still transfer the rent and utilities because that's only fair." Fair. As if fairness had ever been part of the deal. I could have begged. I could have cried. Instead, I swallowed every word burning on my tongue, went to my room, and started folding my life into cardboard boxes. With each drawer I emptied, the anger simmered into something colder, sharper. If they wanted me gone but still wanted my money, fine. I would give them exactly what they asked for. And then I would show them what it really costs to treat someone like a paycheck with legs. That first night, I crashed on an old friend's couch, staring at a water stain on her ceiling while replaying every word my parents had thrown at me. I kept hearing that sentence on a loop: "You'll still pay rent and utilities. That's fair." For years, I had been wiring money home from my marketing job, juggling campaigns by day and side gigs by night to keep everyone afloat. And somehow, I was still the selfish one for finally saying no. Sleep never came. It was more like a series of anxious blinks until morning. By sunrise, I made a decision. If they saw me as an endless stream of automatic transfers, then shutting off that stream was the only way to make them feel what I had been quietly enduring. It wasn't about revenge, it was about balance, about consequences. I stepped out into the crisp city air wearing yesterday's jeans, thanked my friend for letting me crash, and headed to the small cafe where I always went to think. It felt neutral, a pause between my old life and whatever came next. The bell over the door chimed as I walked in, and a familiar voice called out. "Rough night?" It was Jason, the barista who had watched me power through deadlines and breakdowns fueled by stubbornness and coffee. I slid into my usual corner as he brought my drink without asking. "You look like someone just repossessed your soul," he said, dropping into the chair across from me when the morning rush thinned. "They kicked me out," I said flatly. "Told me to pack my stuff so my sister could have my room. And then reminded me I'd still pay the bills. All because I refused to wire more money for tuition when my own savings were hanging by a thread." Jason's expression hardened. "Let me get this straight. They throw you out but expect you to keep funding the house? That's not family. That's a subscription service with emotional blackmail attached." "So what are you going to do?" he asked. "Keep paying and pretend this is normal?" I looked down at my phone. I didn't know, I admitted. But deep inside, a voice whispered that I already did. Years of late nights skipping meals to send extra money, turning down promotions because it didn't fit their needs, quietly paying off bills that weren't mine. If I stop, they'll drown. But if I don't, I will. Jason didn't flinch. "Maybe it's time they learn to swim. You can't set yourself on fire to keep everyone else warm forever." His words hit like a punch and a hug at the same time. I pictured myself at 40, still living paycheck to paycheck because every bonus, every raise, every bit of progress vanished into someone else's crisis. The cafe faded into a low hum as another version of my life flashed before me, one where I never left, never said no, never drew a line. That thought twisted my stomach. Sometimes the only way people learn the value of something is when it disappears. I opened our family chat and typed, "From today on, I won't be sending money for rent, utilities, or tuition. I need to prioritize my own life. Even if you don't understand, this decision is final." I hesitated over the send button, heart pounding. Jason murmured, "If you don't hit send, they'll never take you seriously, and you'll never forgive yourself for backing down." I took a breath, pictured the life I wanted, a small apartment, a savings account that wasn't bleeding, a future that belonged to me, and I hit send. For a full minute, nothing. Then my phone lit up. "We'll talk about this later." No apology, no acknowledgement. Just more pressure. I locked my screen and looked at Jason. "I need to find my own place," I said, steadier than I felt. "Good," he said. "Let them feel what life is like without your money for once." A week later, I found myself standing in the middle of a tiny one-bedroom apartment in Queens. Boxes were stacked unevenly in every corner, the smell of fresh paint mingled with the faint mustiness of old pipes. The furniture was mismatched, mostly pulled from online classifieds, but it was mine. Every inch of the space had been chosen by me, bought by me. For the first time in years, my paycheck went entirely toward my life alone. Rent, groceries, a modest transfer into my savings account, I felt irrationally proud with each deposit. But the quiet was brutal. At my parents' house, there had always been noise. TV blaring, doors slamming, arguments erupting over the smallest things. Here, every sound was mine, the click of my laptop, the hiss of the kettle, the groan of the floor as I paced back and forth. It wasn't peaceful. It felt like punishment. One night, unable to sleep, I pulled out an old shoebox I had tossed into a moving box without thinking. Inside were crumpled receipts, bank statements, scribbled notes tracking years of payments I had made. Tuition deposits, utility bills, grocery runs, surprise medical payments, all under my name, all tied to their emergencies. I spread them out like a puzzle I didn't want to finish. No one had ever asked what those withdrawals felt like on my end. No one checked in during my own hard weeks unless they needed something. The guilt and anger tangled together until it was hard to breathe. I grabbed my phone and opened a chat I had been avoiding, my sister. "How are you holding up?" I typed, almost shaking. She replied faster than I expected, honestly freaked out. "They're panicking about money. Financial aid says the tuition is late. I don't know what to do." Her words hit harder than any insult my parents had thrown at me. For a second, I almost opened my banking app out of reflex. Almost. Instead, I pressed the phone to my chest, staring at the ceiling, listening to the radiator hiss. Another message came, "They keep saying you'll come around, that you're just acting out." Are you? That question sliced deeper than she realized. I thought about all the late nights she had studied while I worked overtime, all the textbooks I had bought instead of fixing my dying laptop, all the times I said I've got it while silently praying my card wouldn't decline. I typed slowly, carefully choosing each word. "I'm not acting out. I'm done being the only adult. I'll help you figure things out, but I'm not fixing everything with my bank account anymore. It's not sustainable." 3 little dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. When she finally replied, I felt a small, fragile relief. "I didn't realize how much you were paying for. I just thought you were okay." I exhaled a laugh that wasn't really a laugh. "I wasn't," I wrote back. "I just got really good at pretending." "Do you think I'm wrong?" I asked, risking it. She paused. Finally, she admitted, "I don't think you're wrong. I just hate that I'm stuck in the middle. I'm scared, Lila." Her words hit me in a different way. Somewhere along the line, team had turned into dependence, and no one told us the rules had changed. Her fear was real, but it wasn't mine to fix anymore. "You're helping now," I said gently. "By seeing it, by not pretending it's fine." We talked for hours about her classes, her part-time work, my new apartment. The conversation ended, and the quiet returned, heavier than before. I lay on my floor, surrounded by the proof of every payment I had made over the years. And a truth settled in my chest: I wasn't just fighting my parents. I was fighting the version of myself they had built, the version that believed suffering in silence was what love looked like. A few days later, my sister asked if we could meet in person, somewhere neutral. A park halfway between my apartment and our old neighborhood. I got there early, clutching a takeout coffee, watching kids chase each other near the swings. When she arrived, she looked smaller somehow. Stress had folded her in on itself. Dark circles under her eyes, messy bun, backpack full of textbooks. She sat down silently beside me. And for a long moment, we just watched the chaos of the playground together. "So," she said finally, forcing a laugh, "you really did it. Your own place. No more family drama in your bedroom." I nodded, feeling the weight of that small victory. Her voice dropped. "They're freaking out. They thought you'd cool off and start sending money again. Dad keeps saying you're ungrateful. Mom cries a lot. Tuition office called twice. Guilt tried to creep in, but I held the line." "And what do you think?" I asked quietly. "Don't repeat their lines. Tell me what you actually think." She picked at the fraying thread on her sleeve. "I think they leaned on you because you let them, because it was easier than fixing their own mess." Her words stung, but they were true. I saw a flashback from years ago, my first full-time paycheck partially going to cover their mortgage shortfall. My father patted me on the shoulder. "You're such a good girl." My mother told me, "You'll understand when you have kids." No one asked what I wanted. Back in the park, she looked at me and whispered, "I hate it here. I hate that I'm mad at them and mad at you at the same time. I just didn't know how to help before." "You're helping now," I told her. "By seeing it, by not pretending it's fine." Her eyes softened. "Okay. I'll try. Just don't disappear on me, okay?" I promised. "Even if I disappear from them, I won't disappear from you." And for the first time, I felt it. We were no longer one hero and one dependent. We were two people standing in the wreckage of our parents' choices, trying to build something healthier from the ground up. A few weeks later, I got a text from my mother. "Can you come over for dinner Sunday? We need to talk." No emojis, no extra words. Just that. If that message had come a few months earlier, I would have panicked, offered to send money, tried to smooth over the tension, hoping to buy my way out of conflict. But now, I stared at it for a long time, thinking about everything I had built, my small apartment, my savings, my boundaries. I typed back carefully, "I can come, but I'm not discussing going back to how things were." "Understood," she replied. That single word somehow made me more nervous than a wall of guilt ever could. Sunday evening arrived. I walked up the familiar path to the house that no longer felt like mine. The lawn was overgrown, a small detail that would never have existed when I lived there. The paint on the porch was peeling. Unopened mail stacked crookedly by the door. Tiny signs of neglect that weren't laziness, just distraction and stress. Inside, the smell of my mother's cooking wrapped around me like a memory. Nostalgic, warm. For a second, I almost allowed myself to relax. Almost. Then I noticed the stack of unpaid bills fanned out on the coffee table. The tension in the room was thick enough to touch. My father sat in his usual chair, eyes on the TV but not really watching. He muted it when he saw me. "You came," he said, as if he hadn't been sure I would. "I said I would," I replied, hanging my coat carefully, as if the wrong move might shatter the fragile truce. My mother emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Her smile was tight, her eyes tired. "Dinner's almost ready," she said. "Let's sit down." We ate in near silence at first, the clink of forks against plates filling the gaps. It almost felt normal, if you ignored the stack of documents at the end of the table. Bank statements, overdue notices, letters from the university. Everything in black and white. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "Your mother and I have been talking," he began. I almost laughed silently at the irony. Talking had always been the one thing we avoided. "About what?" I asked, though the answer was right in front of me. "About everything," he said, gesturing vaguely toward the bills, the tuition letters, the overdue notices. "Things have gotten tighter since you left." He spoke like a weather report. The financial storm hadn't drifted in from nowhere, it had been building for years. My mother jumped in, voice cracking slightly. "We didn't realize how much you were covering. We thought we were managing together, but now the mortgage is behind, utilities are late, and the school is threatening to drop your sister if payments don't catch up. We're scared, Lila." For a moment, I just looked at them. The people who had once treated me like disposable, who had told me to pack my things as if I were just a line item on their budget, were now asking for help. And yet, seeing my mother's trembling hands, the gray at my father's temples, I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt tired. So tired. "I'm not surprised things are tight," I said calmly. I was sending home more than half my income. "Of course it feels tight now." I tapped the nearest envelope lightly. This was always going to happen. The difference is, before it would have happened to me instead of you. My father stiffened. "We're not saying you have to do everything," he protested. But that had been exactly what they had expected for years. "We just need a little help," my mother added softly. "A bridge until we figure things out. You're doing well now, you have your own place, your career." "I have my own place because I stopped bleeding money into a house where I wasn't welcome," I interrupted. "Don't rewrite this like I abandoned you from comfort. You pushed me out and tried to keep my wallet." The room went quiet. My mother swallowed hard. "We made mistakes," she admitted softly. "We were unfair. We took advantage of your sense of responsibility. We told ourselves it was for the family, for your sister's future. But we never asked what it was doing to yours. For that, I'm sorry." The apology landed awkwardly, late, imperfect, but real enough that something in my chest loosened. Still, an apology alone wasn't enough to drag me back into the old pattern. "I appreciate you saying that," I said. "But I'm not going back to sending thousands every month so everyone else can avoid hard choices." "So, what are you saying?" my father asked, frustration creeping back. "You're just going to watch us lose everything?" I looked him in the eye. "I will help in ways that don't destroy me. I'll go over your budget with you, talk to the bank, negotiate payment plans, help my sister with scholarships. I'll even cover one overdue utility bill if needed. But I will not be the sole provider anymore. That's over. Real help, with real limits." He opened his mouth, then closed it. My mother looked at the stack of bills and pushed them toward me. "Show us," she said quietly. "Show us what it looks like to do this without leaning on you for everything." There was fear in her voice, but also something new, respect, recognition. We spent the next hour going line by line through the bills, subscriptions, and expenses. It was brutal, exposing years of financial neglect and over-reliance. By the time I stood up to leave, we had a rough plan. They would sell the car, take extra shifts, stick to the budget. I would cover one overdue bill and help my sister apply for emergency aid. But only those things. No more endless transfers. No more unspoken obligations. At the door, my father hesitated. "You're different," he said quietly. "I am," I admitted. "Scared?" "Yes. But more scared of waking up 10 years from now and realizing I let my life disappear into bills that weren't mine." "You raised me to be responsible. This is what responsibility looks like now." After that dinner, I felt a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. My parents were finally seeing what their choices had cost me, but it wasn't my job to fix everything anymore. The quiet walk home was calming in a way I hadn't expected. My apartment, small and imperfect, was exactly what I needed, a place where every decision was mine, every dollar accounted for, every moment earned. I dove into routines that had been impossible before. Mornings began with oatmeal and coffee at my tiny kitchen table, the sun streaming through the windowsill where my first few plants had started to thrive. I spent hours organizing my finances with Victor, my financial advisor. Together, we separated my accounts into clear categories: fixed expenses, discretionary spending, and savings. Automatic transfers ensured I could accidentally bleed money into other people's emergencies again. Victor reminded me constantly, "Your oxygen mask goes on first, Lila. You can't save anyone if you're suffocating." Those words had stuck with me. Generosity without boundaries wasn't kindness, it was enabling. I had spent years enabling my family to avoid reality. Now, I was learning how to help without losing myself. At work, the change was noticeable. I spoke up in meetings, pushed back when deadlines were unreasonable, and negotiated better terms for projects. My boss remarked on my confidence, the way I no longer apologized for asking for what I deserved. A leadership track project opened up, promising a raise if I could handle it. A year ago, I might have hesitated, worried about extra pressure or the need to juggle my family's crises. This time, I said yes. Meanwhile, my parents were adjusting, painfully and imperfectly. They sold the car, took on extra shifts, and stuck to the budget we had laid out. Calls still came, full of tension and old guilt tactics, but I stayed firm. "I can help with information, not endless money." Repeating it became easier with each conversation. My sister's transformation was just as profound. She started applying for scholarships, taking more hours at her part-time job, and managing her own finances. Her texts carried a new energy, exhausted, but it feels different. Like I'm working for my future, not waiting for someone to rescue me. Those words hit harder than any apology from my parents ever could. She was learning responsibility the hard way, but at least she was learning. I realized that revenge, in the way people often imagined it, wasn't what I was seeking. I wasn't burning bridges or watching my family fail for the sake of cruelty. I was setting boundaries. I was reclaiming my life. And sometimes, watching others experience the consequences of their choices quietly, without chaos consuming me, was the most powerful lesson of all. One rainy evening, I transferred a portion of my paycheck into my growing savings account and looked at the numbers. They had grown steadily, slowly but surely. The constant anxiety that had sat like a stone in my chest for years was finally dulling. I wasn't terrified anymore. Life was still expensive, unpredictable, but it no longer controlled me. Victor called it progress. Jason called it glowing up with spreadsheets. I called it reclaiming my life. One boundary at a time, $1 at a time. Evenings at home became a space for myself, not a battleground. I hosted a small gathering for friends and coworkers, nothing fancy, just takeout, laughter, and conversation. It felt strange to have people around me without the underlying tension of family drama. I laughed at my own jokes, poured wine without guilt, and didn't check my bank account obsessively every time I swiped my card. It was small, but huge. My parents' house, meanwhile, was still theirs to manage. They were learning the hard way that they couldn't rely on me forever. My sister was learning independence. And I, finally, for the first time, was learning what it felt like to truly live for myself. It wasn't perfect. Far from it. But it was mine. And for the first time in years, I realized that sometimes the right choice hurts, but it doesn't destroy you. It builds you. Months passed, and life in my little apartment started to feel like real life instead of a temporary refuge. The small desk in the corner was stacked with campaign briefs and sticky notes, a mix of deadlines and ideas. My walls were decorated with prints from local artists I loved. Plants thrived on the windowsill. Every item, every corner, was mine, and for the first time, that ownership meant more than just property. It meant control over my own life. Work was demanding, but the difference was I could handle it. I no longer took on extra tasks out of obligation, no longer said yes just to prove myself. I negotiated, pushed back, and prioritized. The leadership track project had started, and the raise that came with it felt like validation for the years of hard work I had poured into other people's crises. But life wasn't without its tests. My parents called more often now, not for money, but for advice. I had promised to help with budgeting and scholarships, and I kept that promise. But every conversation came with a reminder, I cannot do everything anymore. Some days, the guilt pressed against me like a heavy coat, but I reminded myself that boundaries were not cruelty, they were survival. One afternoon, my mother called, voice tight. The bank might not approve the refinance. We might have to sell sooner than we expected. I felt the old familiar pull of responsibility. My instinct was to offer money immediately, to patch their problem with my paycheck. But I stopped myself. I took a deep breath. I can help you plan, I said, keeping my voice calm. We can look at rental options, negotiate payments, explore assistance programs. But I can't float another mortgage. That's not sustainable for me or for you. Her silence on the line spoke volumes. She had realized, finally, that I had limits, and they had to respect them. Meanwhile, my sister was flourishing in her own way. Scholarship applications were submitted, part-time shifts taken, textbooks bought with her own effort. She sent me messages that made me proud. I didn't think I could manage this, but it's doable. I feel more in control than I ever did waiting for you to fix everything. It was a strange mix of relief and validation. For years, I had carried their burdens silently, thinking it was my duty. Now, they were learning to navigate consequences without me. My sister was learning independence. And I was learning that helping didn't mean sacrificing my entire life. The real test came unexpectedly. My father called one evening, frustration clear in his voice. We need help with the tuition deadline. You're not going to make us lose everything, right? I took a long pause, feeling the weight of all those years, all those sacrifices I had made without acknowledgement. I will help in ways that are planned and fair, I said firmly. I'll assist with resources, budgeting, and guidance. I will not be the only one carrying the weight anymore. That stops now. There was silence on the line, then a begrudging acceptance. It wasn't perfect, and there was still tension, but they were learning. Slowly, painfully, they were learning. At home, I reflected on how far I had come. From sleeping on a friend's couch, anxious and exhausted, to managing my own apartment, my own finances, and my own future. Every dollar I saved, every boundary I enforced, felt like reclaiming a piece of my life that had been lost in the name of family duty. Evenings became moments of quiet joy. I hosted small gatherings, cooked meals I chose, laughed without the underlying dread of a call from my parents. I had friends who supported me, a career that challenged me, and a sister who was learning to stand on her own. Most importantly, I realized something profound: helping someone doesn't require sacrificing yourself. True love and support involve boundaries, respect, and shared responsibility. I had spent years confusing sacrifice for love, obligation for care. Now, I understood that boundaries weren't cruelty, they were a gift, for me and for those I cared about. I still felt pangs of guilt sometimes, old habits dying slowly. But each time I enforced a boundary, each time I said no without apology, I grew stronger. And each time I saw my sister succeed, my parents adjust, I knew I was right. Life was hard, unpredictable, but it was mine. And for the first time in years, that felt enough. Spring had fully arrived, and with it came a sense of renewal I hadn't felt in years. My apartment no longer felt like a temporary refuge, it felt lived in, chosen, and earned. The small collection of plants on the windowsill thrived, the art on the walls made me smile, and my desk held the organized chaos of someone finally in control of her life. Every morning, I woke up knowing that my decisions, financial, professional, and personal, were mine to make. Work continued to challenge me, but I had grown into a version of myself that could thrive under pressure. I managed campaigns with confidence, spoke up in meetings, and negotiated without guilt. The leadership track project had pushed me to my limits, but it had also proven my ability to stand firm and advocate for myself. I was no longer the person who took on everyone else's responsibilities at the expense of her own well-being. My parents' situation had stabilized, though it was far from perfect. They had sold the car, taken extra shifts, and learned to manage their budget. The house was still theirs, but the pressure was finally shared. My sister was thriving too. She had secured scholarships, adjusted her work schedule, and was now navigating life's challenges with a sense of responsibility I had rarely seen before. One evening, as I sat in my living room balancing my own bills, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. "Thank you for showing us how to handle this. We understand now. I'm proud of you." I stared at the screen, a mixture of relief and quiet satisfaction washing over me. For the first time, acknowledgement didn't come with guilt or expectation. It came with respect. Jason, my friend and confidant, noticed the change too. "You're glowing," he said one afternoon at the cafe. "Not just your hair or your smile, your energy. It's different. You're living for you now." I laughed but felt the truth in his words. The anxiety that had once defined me had faded from a constant roar to a quiet hum. I could still help, still care, but on my terms. Financial stability and personal boundaries were only part of the transformation. I had learned something even more vital: self-respect. For years, I had measured my worth by my ability to fix everyone else's problems. Now, I measured it by my courage to set limits, my willingness to say no, and my commitment to my own growth. Each choice I made reinforced the value of my time, energy, and future. A few months later, my parents called to tell me they had found a rental they could afford and that my sister was adjusting well to her new routine. They weren't expecting me to fund anything, just to guide where necessary. I realized that my earlier decisions, difficult as they had been, had forced all of us to grow. My parents had finally faced consequences they could not outsource, my sister had learned independence, and I had built a life where my generosity was sustainable, not draining. The quiet of my apartment no longer felt lonely. It felt earned. Hosting friends, cooking meals I wanted to eat, laughing without guilt, these were small joys that carried immense weight after years of self-sacrifice. And every night, when I looked at my growing savings, my flourishing plants, and my organized desk, I was reminded of one truth: reclaiming your life requires courage, patience, and boundaries. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. I had learned that helping others doesn't mean losing yourself. True support comes with limits, shared responsibility, and respect. By finally saying no, I had not destroyed my family. I had created a system where everyone could learn to stand on their own. As I closed my laptop that evening, the city lights reflecting across my windows, I felt a calm I hadn't known since childhood. I wasn't the villain. I wasn't a martyr. I was the main character of my life, finally living it on my own terms. And in that moment, all the fear, all the anxiety, and all the long nights alone felt worth it. I had reclaimed my life. One boundary at a time. $1 at a time. And I knew this time, it was for good.